All right. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, I was looking for a red button. All right, everyone. We are going to get started in a moment. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Nature for Wellness Symposium, the second day. I want to thank everyone for coming today and everyone who came to last night's session with Captain Sarah Newman. Sarah's discussions on the impacts of nature-based health solutions and all the activity that occurs within our national parks left me light and buoyant last night, truly inspired and hopeful for this wonderful Nature RX movement. Sarah is a special person, fierce with passion and charisma, and most importantly, kindness. For those who weren't able to come to yesterday's session with Dr. Newman, my name is Sam Kutzarek. I'm the principal investigator of the symposium, although I have a very rich and lovely team of Nature RX project team members supporting this project and co-collaborating on it. If people haven't heard of Nature RX at Michigan, I think you came to the right session. Nature RX is a collaborative project of different units and sponsors across campus that are united by a simple philosophy: nature can heal. I think it is part of the human condition to feel wonder and awe with nature. And when we go and engage with the natural world, we experience a myriad of health benefits, ranging from improved memory and cognition, to decreased feelings of depression and anxiety, to more robust pro-earth and sustainability behaviors. Is what the author Florence Williams calls the nature fix in her 2017 book, very appropriately titled The Nature Fix. This symposium will explore many of these benefits and how, as individuals, as community members, as students, staff, and faculty, we can integrate nature into our health and wellness visions and practices. I wanted to extend mine and the Nature RX team's sincerest gratitude to the Symposium and Nature RX sponsors, Information and Technology Services, Mathi Botanical Gardens and Nichols Arboretum, M Healthy, Voices of the Staff, Rackham Graduate School, and we are in their lovely space today, the College of Literature, Science, and Arts, Year of Sustainability and Mental Health Units, the School for Environment and Sustainability, the Planet Blue Ambassador Program, Michigan Medicine's Office of Patient Experience, and Michigan Medicine's Department of Communications. It is a lengthy list full of really wonderful people that inspire me and drove me to put on this symposium. Today, we will find energy and inspiration in this community, whether it is through learning how to take care of ourselves, others, and the planet, or collaborating with other Wolverines to create a healthier and happier future at U of M and beyond. Today is a day to renew our shared commitments to take care of our and the planet's health, and to respect the wisdom and diversity of a group of people who bring incredible passion, dedication, and creativity to their work. As we begin today's event, I would like to acknowledge that whenever there is uncertainty and change in the world, as there is right now, this can bring up a variety of responses. People may be holding lots of emotions or worries, and that is okay. It is a human thing to do. I hope that today, however, we can anchor ourselves in our shared value for health and well-being and the joy and peace that can be found in the natural world. Throughout today, you will hear from a variety of really, really wonderful people who will detail their experiences, research, and practices with regards to nature and health. I hope you leave the programming feeling inspired to integrate nature into your own wellness practices in some way, whether that is through art, movement, or sound, or some other method. And as we seek nature across campus, it is important to acknowledge the history of the lands and waters where we hope to engage. I will proceed with our university's land acknowledgement. The University of Michigan is located on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people. In 1817, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations made the single largest land transfer to the University of Michigan. This was offered ceremonially as a gift through the treaty at the foot of the rapids so that their children could be educated. Through these words of acknowledgement, their contemporary and ancestral ties to the lands and their contributions to the university are renewed and reaffirmed. And now I would like to introduce our keynote speaker for today. Many of you may remember his name from his role as director of the university's COVID-19 pandemic response. Dr. Robert Ernst is a primary care physician with over 2 decades of leadership experience at U of M on campus and at the medical school. As U of M's chief health officer, he serves as an advisor to President Ono and executive leadership on all aspects of campus health and wellness. In addition to his oversight of campus medical services, counseling services, health promotion, and recreation programs, he has developed a lasting public health infrastructure for the campus community. Dr. Ernst also oversees the Wellbeing Collective, which is working to embed health and principles into every level of the University of Michigan. A Michigan alum, he and his wife, also a physician at U of M, have raised 4 children in Ann Arbor and enjoyed time outside year-round as a family. And we can give a very warm welcome to Dr. Robert Ernst. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sam. It's a real pleasure to be here. Let's see if I can figure this out. I'm going to try the old school way. There we go. I like right here. I'm just going to. That's fine. I can just hit the button. That's good. I'm really grateful for the invitation to be part of this symposium. Sam, I'm really, really impressed with the energy and the initiative that you've taken. And I agree. I think you're leaning into an area that will probably 10 years from now feel super routine, you know, and I have that sort of perspective as I was listening yesterday. It's sort of a tough act to follow because of the, I think, really insightful presentation last night. I want to thank all the conference and symposium event staff too. I don't consider myself an expert in this area. You know, I have learned a ton just in preparing for this presentation, and that was a gift in and of itself. So I really appreciate the opportunity to participate. I got to spend some time with Captain Newman yesterday and found her to be really a fascinating colleague and person. And her presentation was really just inspiring in many ways. One of the things that I really appreciated was her recognition, like you did, Sam, of the time and, you know, the fact that it's been an emotional time for many. And she kind of went off script a little bit and did a mindfulness exercise that really got me thinking. I actually brought my sticky notes from last night. I'm going to reflect on these in a bit. But I'm also going to go off script a little bit too, and if it's okay, before I talk about my take on social prescribing as a physician, I thought I would maybe find out who's in the room, you know, so if people will just kind of raise your hand if you're, do we have undergraduate students here? Who's undergraduate students? Great. Couple? Good. Welcome. What about graduate students? A few more. Thank you. Counted on that. Faculty? Got a fair number? Faculty? Got the cohort amongst yourselves back there? Good. All right. What about health promotion people? You guys count. I know. These are my people. I know them. All right, you don't have to have it in your job title, just what you do. What about mental health professionals? A few. Okay, good. What about healthcare providers? That's what I was expecting, just me and maybe 1 or 2 others. That's sort of has become kind of my comfort level, and I find myself increasingly attached to groups where I'm often the only physician in the room. In fact, I'll be leaving today after this and head to a symposium of leaders so people who are associate vice presidents of health and wellness at the major universities of the country. There'll be 50 of us convened, and I'll be one of probably 2 or 3 physicians in the group. So this is not traditionally work that is advanced by physicians. So I thought I could talk a lot this morning about, actually I could talk the whole time just on my reflections from last night, but I will not do that. But I could talk a lot about our institutional strategy on addressing the imperative of mental health within our own community. That is where I think I consider myself more expert. But I'm so intrigued by this notion of social prescribing, with the specific example of Nature RX as a case of that I thought I would just kind of talk about my role as an individual physician and how I've sort of learned this skill. And then apply that to what we're doing institutionally around health and wellness, if that's okay. So this is, I've been here at the university. I'm a graduate of the medical school, I didn't do my undergraduate studies here, but I came here in 1987 as a medical student, and I have not left. I've been here for 37 years, and one of only a few people I can think of that has sort of had really rewarding professional experiences both on campus and at the health system. I know we're right across the street from one another, but there's really not nearly as much, exchange as there could be, or maybe ought to be. But I've been really fortunate. The early part of my career was as a clinician educator at the medical school. And I identify as a general internist. In fact, I would get interviewed sometimes about my COVID role, and people ask, God, you do all these roles. What would be the one thing that you would, if you had to give up everything else? And it's such an easy question for me. I just identify as a practicing physician as my most important professional role. And I still practice, even though I don't, have any effort for that. I don't need to. I just love to. But my original practice at the hospital back in the mid-90s through the early, whatever you call the first decade of 2000s, was as a complex care provider. Back then, we took care of patients in the hospital and outside the hospital, and continuity of care was built into what it means to be a general internist. It is the most challenging part, and it's the best part of being a general internist, is getting to know people both when they are, in their usual state and then at their sort of most difficult times. And partnering with patients is such a privilege. That is my core identity. The shift I made in my career in 2003 was to come to campus as the medical director at UHS. And, many of my friends and colleagues at the hospital couldn't believe I made such a shift, because my practice at the hospital was really quite complex care, predominant. A lot of people in and out of the hospital, and really quarterbacking people who had, requirements for a lot of subspecialty care, and to think that I would sort of shift entirely to go to student health clinic was kind of mind-boggling to many of my friends and colleagues. And it's true that if you were to guess what are the sort of most common clinical things that we encounter at the health service, if you guessed, upper respiratory infections, we call those URIs, you'd be correct. If you guessed bladder infection, we call those UTIs, you'd be correct. We do a lot of that. If you guessed sexually transmitted infections, we call those STIs, you'd be correct. And along with, other categories of what we call episodic illnesses is one of the 5 areas of core work that we do at the health service. And well, I'll tell you what I do. I recognize that if you survey students and ask them what are some of the most important health-related issues that have negative impacts on their academic success, among the most common things there are episodic illnesses. They can be very disruptive to continuity of their academic study and can take them kind of off track. And I think our imperative, and I have to really work hard with our teams to make sure that we prioritize access along with friendly service and high quality of care that students should expect when they receive clinical care. The other four areas of core work kind of overlap with some of those common episodic illnesses. So we do, episodic care, gynecology and sexual health, musculoskeletal and sports med, and primary and preventive care. But the fifth is mental health. So two parts. I mentioned some of the most commonly encountered episodic, conditions from students on campus as being upper respiratory bladder infections, sprains, rashes. But some of the most common reasons why students seek care is for anxiety, depression, sleeplessness, ADHD. These are reasons that right up there with episodic illness. In fact, beyond that, these four things are what students will say are the four most common reasons why they struggle academically due to their health. So that's why I talk about mental health as core work in a medical setting. It is not something that, we can refer out. Just like, we'll talk a little bit more about what we know of our students. So I actually think we have a lot of information about the issue of student mental health. Even before the pandemic, there was general acceptance of the fact that this was becoming an increasingly prevalent problem. Our institution, like all of our peers, were investing in increased staffing levels at the counseling center and finding that as they were doing so, objective measures of the prevalence was just getting worse. The dichotomy amongst our students, and I would actually think this might actually apply to many of us in the room too, who aren't students still, is that if you survey our students and ask them how they would rate their overall health, 85% would say it's either good, very good, or excellent. And if you ask on that same survey what percentage of our students would consider themselves thriving, it's less than 40%. So that's such an important observation for those of us working in the health and wellness space to recognize that while we are individuals and we're just one person at a time, we're complex at the same time. And we can sort of think of our physical health separate from our emotional well-being, when in fact they're so intrinsically related. The trends that have occurred since the pandemic are pretty striking. And a couple of things that we would highlight, and we could talk about what some of the drivers are, increased sense of isolation, increased use of social media. And the other that we see has been a really interesting change that I would not have predicted 20 years ago when I started work on campus, is that there is a decreased sense of stigma for help seeking. We thought that might be a little bit impossible to fix 20 years ago, and yet that is a real difference now. And we have found that as many as 70% of our incoming freshmen now will report before they come to campus that they've had prior experience meeting with a mental health professional. I mean, that is, I think, partly good news, that we have sort of addressed this issue of help seeking. It's not as straightforward as stigma is going away, and because I think if you ask those same students if they would judge their classmates poorly if they were seeking mental health services, a very high percentage of students will say no. But if they feel themselves judged, if others knew that they were seeking health or mental health services, there's a much higher percentage there too. There's a difference, I think, between stigma for help seeking and shame for whatever we are sort of seeking help for, That's a real issue. But the challenge is that now we have increased demand, not just because of prevalence of concern, but we have reduced or increased demand because we have experienced users. And these are experienced users of systems So they become more sophisticated, and the expectation is for something different than the traditional brief intervention for adjustments. So we need new models of care. And I think that's where we have had to try to imagine a system beyond just adding more of the same. Kind of follow along here. So I think it's a couple of things. In medical training, as a medical provider, I would agree that I did not receive much formal training in cognitive behavioral therapy or even behavioral psychology in general. And I think I don't know if that's entirely true. I should know this. You know, my son's a current medical student here. We talk about these things. But I actually don't think it's accurate to say that behavioral psychology and medical, care are as separate as I sometimes hear in the room. I thought it was in the room a little bit last night, to be honest. I'm a little bit, triggered by it, but I'm used to it. So I acknowledge that there's a certain training gap, but I believe that there's more that happens in the context of medical care than people realize, unless they've got a really good relationship with a continuity of care, primary care physician, where you get into some things. And I think that's where I did most of my training, was in the exam room with people, and learned a lot by just taking time. And that's sort of the problem in my mind, less so than training, more so it's just time. Our systems are so driven by the currency of 20-minute visits, and the quick turnaround causes one of the things in my profession that I just wish could be different, which is that if you're constrained to a 20-minute visit for everybody, then everybody's visit becomes 20 minutes. And we, not me, well, yeah, me, people like me, have learned either consciously or subconsciously that we can end any visit whenever we want. 3 ways. 1, order a test. Anybody been to the doctor and then 18 minutes into the exam, people go, well, I think here's what we got to do. We're going to order a bunch of labs and maybe get some kind of x-ray or CAT scan or something. That ends it, and then that sort of extends the visit, because then you got to bring them back and talk about all those things. So you can do that. Number 2 is you can send them to somebody else. You get referred. It's like, wow, this sounds like a lot's going on here, and I think we've used our time. Well, but I think we're going to send you to fill in the blank specialist. And then that specialist sends you to a different specialist, and then that sends you to a different specialist, and it becomes super compartmentalized. And ultimately, you end up back with a primary care provider until they run out of specialists. That happens a lot. I do not love that. We could handle that if we had more time. The third is you could just write a prescription, and that's a real common way to end visits. And it's kind of relevant to the work we're talking about today, because, mutually, providers, healthcare providers, and patients don't mind that so much. They expect that, actually. We talk about it, here's the thing, what do you think's going on, and here's what I think I would try. And it usually ends with some kind of prescription for a medication. And what blows me away is that patients, I believe, work that medication into their lifestyle and start doing that. They just start taking the medicine, just like we ask them to. And they change their routines. They may lay them out on the counter, may fill out a pill box every Sunday night. They may have some side effect from it and may make them feel bad, but they trust that they think that's the right thing to do because I asked them to do it. And then we come back and ask them how it's going. And it becomes a behavioral change. It's not just the chemical in their body, it's actually a behavioral change because I've asked somebody to do it, because I think there's something that might be better if they do that. I think that's relevant to what we're talking about with this social prescribing. Anyway, I think that a lot of things historically around sort of modification of the way you conduct your life is, I've learned, governed by the way our brain works. And I think I learned some of this through self-help. These are 3 of my favorite books. And I think some of this is overlap. Qualified again, not formally trained. I'm already on record, right? Good. I'm looking at Kelsey, I'm sorry. And no formal training, but read these books. And I love this, and I talk to patients individually about this stuff. I do. And I talk about the ABCs because it works for me. And, you have adversity happening to you all day long. It's not just big stuff, it's little stuff. It's like I'm running late, or I'm in traffic, or I'm talking to a friend, and when we think of adversity, we usually think about the bad stuff happening. But actually good stuff is adversity too. We react to adversity. And I think of adversity as situations, and conditions, and it's stress. And I call that stress. I don't call stress inside me. I think the world is stress. And what happens to us is our belief system around the situations that we're in. And those beliefs are really thoughts. And then thoughts drive the way we feel. That's my pedestrian understanding of cognitive behavioral psychology. I hope I'm warm on that. At least it aligns with some of these respected authors. And our brains can actually do that sort of thinking part either fast or slow. I believe that we're built for survival, and our quick thinking brain is usually a sort of react and avoid danger brain. So we're actually conditioned to just sort of avoid things that cause negative thoughts. And then I'm trained by sort of this, Ethan Cross is, I think he's a department chair in behavioral psychology here in LSNA, and a friend of mine. And I love talking to Ethan about this stuff because he will say a couple of things like our brain talks to us all the time, and it tends to be negative thoughts, because if it's sort of, keeping us vigilant about stuff that, like me, coming here and having to give a talk in front of a bunch of people. This is not my comfort zone. I like that one-on-one in the office much better. So hypervigilance going on in here right now. And my brain is telling me, oh my God, Captain Newman was so much better at this. That's what it is. That's what's going on in there. But, what we do is we have control of those thoughts and behaviors around some of the conditions. So what we are less good at, because we're reactive so much, is we're actually less good at deciding to put ourselves in situations that we find sort of relaxing, as opposed to avoiding situations that we find distressing. And I think this is super relevant to the work of social prescribing. I'm going way off the page now about this because I actually do believe generalized anxiety is a clinical disorder, but I actually don't talk about it that way with individual patients. I talk about anxiety as an energy inside of us. I believe that we each are built with sort of a baseline sort of level of anxiety, and I believe that society has actually come up with words to sort of describe some of those baseline sets. You can either be high-strung or type A, or you can be laid back or easygoing. We even use the term sort of middle of the road sometimes, to take sort of that observation that we're not sort of on an extreme at baseline. But I believe that we have these individual sort of emotional reactions, or maybe these thought reactions or reactions to specific situations. These are adversities in the ABCs. I just call them sort of situations or stress. That's the situation. And it's fascinating because I have a couple of examples here of how the reaction that we have to certain situations tends to be pretty consistent over time. And that lends us to sort of avoidance behaviors. For me, I put on there flying. I'm one of those people. I'm sorry. There's probably some of us in the group, right, who just think it's going down, right? So I try not to fly. I just don't get it. So I avoid it. And that's a bit of a problem because I'm married to somebody who loves to travel and finds it super energizing. And there's conflict there. And 31 years later, we have to go through this every time. And sometimes we actually have worked it out where she and my daughter will fly and me and my sons will drive to meet them. That's how we will do things, as sort of avoidance and management of these sort of stressors. That's what we do. Music, we don't really agree with either. You know, this is my happy spot up there. For my wife, 31 years later, that's the fingernails on the chalkboard. You know, that's just how it's built. You know, but I'll get back to, and football's another one where my wife and I don't really agree. I find it super energizing, and I'll just say it doesn't agree in our household. One of the things that my friend Ethan Cross agreed with me when I said is that he's got a toolkit as part of his book. I'm not boosting his book, but I just, you know, actually probably am. But he has a toolkit. He calls it the Chatter Toolkit. And his research would show that there are certain conditions, while a lot of these things are variable in our experience, certain things are nearly universal, right? Sure it is. Nature is one of them. You know, connecting with nature tends to have a really positive effect for most of us. That's really different than yacht rock. You know, music is one of those things. I've learned through Ethan, I'm citing him just because I don't consider myself expert or the researcher here, it's why I'm doing that, says that his research would suggest that 90% of people would rate music as a relaxing thing. And 10% of people would report regularly engaging in music in some way. That's what we do because we're less programmed to just go to the things that actually lower our anxiety. We're more programmed to avoid the things that we think will become distressing. So I think that's the important part. That's how I am super curious about social prescribing. Social prescribing, we've talked about it in healthcare for a while, and I don't think it's super hard to imagine models for where we could operationalize some of the ideas that are coming out of groups like Nature RX. Because we have examples of doing non-medical intervention to help address the needs of people in a holistic way. And these would include referrals to social workers to address the social determinants of health, whether that's arranging transportation to visits or, you know, addressing home care and home nursing and things like that. But, you know, I think there are other really super mainstream examples of this also for us to refer to nutritionists. You know, oftentimes that has a bit of a medicalized approach where it's sort of addressing a lipid disorder or some other kind of condition. But, you know, increasingly I think we're referring to nutritionists just to become part of a care team. So I think it's not hard to imagine that we could operationalize systems like other countries have done to take advantage of that inherent trust with a relationship with a healthcare provider and capitalize on the ability to connect people with positive emotion. Because again, if I can get into a room with somebody and figure out that there's some way I'm trying to help them and they're willing to take a chemical and put it in their body every day for a month, you know, it seems super logical to me that if I came up with a way to refer them to, you know, some sort of natural setting, and the example we heard about Parks RX, about you being able to sort of, you know, walk this route every day, you know, is so compelling to me in that way as a practicing physician. More research that I sort of came across is that it's not the quantity of the experience that actually matters with these sorts of social prescriptions. There's evidence to suggest that it's the quality of the time. That's why these, you know, exercises like last night were just right in time for me to just quiet and have that sort of mindfulness moment, you know, or just structured ways to, you know, unplug the phone at dinner. You know, these are strategies, you know, that I think are really important. And I'm curious about ways that we could formalize people to do that. So sort of the stop and smell the flowers along the way. That's sort of a golf reference, actually, you know, for people who know it. Actually, it's sort of attributed to Walter Hagen, a golfer who was like, You know, if you're having a bad day at the course, just remember, and my dad used to always say this too, my worst day at the course was always better than my best day ever at work. You know, just sort of, my dad was a piece of work. But I'm going to shift gears a little bit and say how this kind of strategy would align very much with some of the institutional efforts around health and wellness. Anybody heard of the Okanagan Charter? Good, not bad. So homework assignment, everybody who leaves here today, please, because I think this is going to be a no-brainer for this group. The Okanagan Charter is an international charter convened or authored in 2015 on the campus of the University of British Columbia. So we have a connection there. The international community of higher education has been further along than the United States in its efforts to try and prioritize health and wellness. And we're catching up. But the international community of health promoting campuses convened in 2015 to author this charter, which is our blueprint and our framework institutionally here at Michigan. We formally adopted the Okanagan Charter at the University of Michigan in 2021 at the height of the pandemic. And the charter itself is a commitment to, it's really an aspirational commitment to be a health promoting university. And the call to action is to embed health and wellness into your systems and policies. Sounds simple, but we actually have to, when you formally adopt this, you have to actually create a sort of plan for how you're going to do that. As of today, only 31 universities in the United States have adopted. The University of Michigan was among the very first. And we're really helping others lead the way on this. Of the 31 campuses, 4 are in the state of Michigan, and Michigan State's about to adopt also, and many of our peers in the state, like Western Michigan and Grand Valley State and Northern, are using our model as their template. And how we do this is through a structured approach called collective impact. So our well-being collective is a real thing. It's the backbone structure for how we bring people together around a common agenda and discuss mutually reinforcing activities around our policies and systems at the university to make sure that we are considering the health and wellness of the community in the way we conduct ourselves. It's different than having important downstream resources like we talked about before that ought to be coordinated and integrated, but we ought to be working upstream also to address the drivers of distress in our community. And that's where we're putting a lot of our work. So it's an easy read, literally. This publication is like 3 pages long. So homework for those of you who haven't heard about it, the Okanagan Charter is a real thing. It fits into our strategy for mental health at the university because it is working upstream. Working upstream are what I call the universal strategies for health and wellness. They're different and they don't de-emphasize the importance of having an integrated system of care. We've been doing some really important things also on the downstream. You know, we heard yesterday about the appointment of a chief behavioral health strategist in HR for employees. We have similarly in student life named a chief mental health officer. These are leaders that are helping to organize and integrate our systems of care. On the campus for students, that means an administrative merger of our counseling center and the health center. That means launch of wellness coaching as opportunities for students to take a holistic look at their various perspectives on the sort of model of well-being, and through behavioral interview or motivational interviewing, they can sort of prioritize some things in their life. So the lane for, I think, strategies like Nature RX are to try and include sort of expansion and highlighting some of the universal strategies that are available for the whole community. I put within this category screenings that we do for early detection of people at risk. I put in this category, you know, expansion and promotion of our campus recreation facilities and programs. These are available to the whole community to help uplift our health and wellness. And I think strategies that would expand access and connection to our natural surroundings would align perfectly with that. And I'm almost done because I know I'm sort of going over, I think. But the institution has put its money where its mouth is here, and the Vision 2034, look to Michigan. I can't believe this, actually. I really am super proud of the institution when they called out the 4 core action areas in our strategic plan, that human health and wellness is one of those core action areas. And it's right up there with sustainability, right, and civic engagement. These all are sort of interdependent priorities. I think this was such a thoughtful strategy. And within that human health and wellness action area, there are some obvious stuff that make total sense. And it's, why I'm here, actually, is to know I'm at a place. I don't do cutting edge research, but I love being at a place that does cutting edge research or has these advanced systems of care, precision health programs. These are understandably part of that action item. But also in there is a commitment to advancing the health and wellness of our own campus community. And that still gives me a little bit of goosebumps when I say it out loud. And I think, the way the vision then works with our campus plan to explicitly call out the importance of our green spaces is really, really sort of important. And I actually really look forward to, advancing some of the opportunities that we have to formalize ways to more intentionally have people connect with our nature and less so having to sort of figure it out on their own. So I'll end with, I don't think I actually referred, I thought I was going to, got really thinking about that exercise. Oh, it's not even here. Did that not make the slide? I had this great slide. I had a bunch of pictures I wanted to use. I'm looking at Sarah. She pulled a lot of my pictures. And we didn't know, that Captain Newman was going to have a bunch of pictures. And I was like, and so we did that mindfulness exercise, and I had a slide, my happy place is Lake Michigan. I just have this place. There's a nature conservancy just south of Grand Haven that we go. I'll be there this afternoon. And I have this beautiful picture, and I didn't even realize, I actually thought I still had the slide in here, but I have this beautiful picture at sunset, and it's on the beach, the sun's going down, the sky just blows up with color, and there were these birds that just took off right in through that. And, it doesn't matter really, it's just what's going on in my life. If I'm just sitting there, it's just I start feeling very different. And I did that exercise last night, where I had to think of a place and think of 3 things. And I put sunsets, and I put beach, and I put birds. And I didn't even connect that I thought I had a slide right in there. But those were the 3 things I said. And I hope you guys all keep that sort of exercise with you as a tool that you don't need a prescription for, but we really ought to be intentional about reminding people that it can help. So thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity. And I hope you all just enjoy the rest of the symposium. It's really great work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ernst. And let me just say that all that you said perfectly teed up what I want to talk about today. And thank you for your personal and honest description and for talking about upstream and Vision 2034 and Campus Plan 2050 and uplifting, because that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm Katie Stannard. I represent the Nature RX project team. And I also want to say that what I'm talking about today really is a collaboration and a collection of some of the hopes and dreams and wishes of the project team. And central to all that we have done is we believe nature can heal. And from the start, this has really been our guiding thought. What if we reconnected with nature to help us heal, to help each other to heal? What if going into nature was one of the prescriptions? And what if we used a simple tech tool as an encouragement to take breaks in nature, to rejuvenate, restore, and refresh? And what if we could say to each other, hey, let's go take a nature break. Let's take our meeting outside. So Dr. Ernst was talking about the exercise that Captain Newman led us in yesterday, which was phenomenal. And I have just a mini exercise. If you would think about someone or something for which you are grateful. I am grateful for you. I want to express my deep gratitude to all the speakers and sponsors and collaborators for joining in to realize Sam's dream of a symposium on Nature RX. Yay, you. And with that in mind, I want to thank our sponsors and collaborators. And gratitude is going to be a roadmap for what I talk about with Nature RX, present, past, and future. And just if you'll indulge me for a moment. All right, smile. I just wanted to document our moment of togetherness. So my title is Turn to Nature RX, because I believe that Nature RX can help us rise to meet some of the important issues and opportunities of our time. Nature RX could play a vibrant role in supporting campus plan objectives around wellness promotion, illness prevention, and fostering healthy communities. And as Dr. Ernst was mentioning, and thinking about Vision 2034, that vibrant and health-conscious campus culture, and Campus Plan 2050's health, well-being, and enhancement of natural spaces around campus, as well as the vitally important Okanagan Charter. So you might be wondering, what is Nature RX at Michigan? We are an interdisciplinary project team of volunteers from around the university working to expand outreach and app use. Some of our current activities include collaborations, outreach to support patient and visitor information through our wonderful partners in patient experience, integrating Nature RX into big campus events, and supporting a culture of well-being. So Nature RX began in 2019 with one student. Just like one student, Sam, had this beautiful idea for a symposium. One student, a nursing student intern at Mathi Botanical Gardens, had this beautiful idea to support mental health of University of Michigan students. And I should mention, she's now a registered nurse at Michigan Medicine also. And following her work, a group of MBGNA student staff curated 100 spots around campus for taking breaks. They took photos, they wrote descriptions, and importantly, they described accessibility for each and every one of those spaces. And Katrina, who's here today, worked with those students to develop that initiative. Following a pandemic pause, we partnered with, or it became a Voices of the Staff project, and with the foundational support of Information and Technology Services leadership, who wanted to support mental health on campus, an app was developed. And I want to say thank you, Chris Eagle and Robbie Pensy, for all of your leadership. Within just a few short months of their participation, a beta app was released, building on the students' work. And part of the free Michigan app, the Nature RX app, provides mobile optimized content for people at Michigan. And importantly for our project team, we are able to update sites and locations through an interface. And the project team's goal throughout was that it could be usable by anyone who came in contact with the University of Michigan: visitors, students, employees, patients, and families. So we believe that NatureX can really make a difference for everyone from students to staff to faculty to providers, patients and families. And as this simple tool but expansive philosophy, we believe it might augment our well-being efforts while at the same time really revitalize how we think about nature and the outdoors. And because everything we do on the NatureX project team is a collaboration, we have brainstormed about some future ideas. So get ready. So as we shift to thinking about the future, it's important to note that we are a volunteer cross-campus collaboration, which has some pluses and minuses. Pluses, there's some independence and creativity, and minus, needing to look for monetary support as needed, and no direct FT support for the program other than the support through members' in-kind work. What could NatureRx do at the University of Michigan? Improve patient and family experience, improve outcomes, improve resilience, lessen anxiety and depression, foster community, help balance screen time, and build connections. And what if we explored collaborations with health entities for prescription pilots? And what if Michigan medicine providers could prescribe them? And what if Michigan became a leader in research into nature spaces, the impact of nature interventions, as well as into research about some of the systemic, historical, and racial barriers? And just a note, we will be sharing slides, so I may have put a lot of content on the slides, so if you don't read it, you can check it out later. How might we shift to nature-centric curricular practices if faculty took classes outside, if we held a campus-wide day for meetings and classes outside, and if we supported additional green space development in communities? Imagine, say, for example, a NatureRx park at a school or community location where one didn't exist, which could be used and supported by people in the neighborhood. And how cool would that be? Also, in the spiritual domain of well-being, nature could be a fruitful avenue for exploring meaning and purpose and transcendence and awe. And what about the future of the NatureRx app? What if it could become a model for other institutions and agencies in encouraging nearby nature access? With artificial intelligence, could an interface help guide a user based on their interests? Say, for example, I want to go on a 10-minute tree walk or experience. I'd like to find birdsong nearby. And of course, our big goal is that we want all who engage with the university and with U of M Health to be able to utilize the app as well, and would look forward to crowdsourcing new places and locations. In Campus 2050, there's this really terrific passage, and as a former English major, I love quotations, and this one really encompasses the theme of building bridges and breaking barriers to enhance collaboration opportunities across campus by creating hubs of connection that enrich student experiences, stimulate creative expression, foster interdisciplinary academic and research activities, and drive innovation. And we feel like NatureRx fits into all of that. So what if people noticed nature in all its forms, in all its variations, and really found peace and human connection, and found healing by turning to nature? Thank you for listening and for sharing in our vision for NatureRx. And I wanted to take a moment to pause and invite some questions and answers. Go ahead. Or
Resist, you talked about like an aspirational relationship with Blue Cross Blue Shield for nature-related themes. Is that in the works, or it's an interesting idea?
It's not in the works, but I was hoping that just by saying it out loud, it might plant a few seeds. Other questions, thoughts? A couple here.
So it sounds like the idea with BCBS is around maybe specifically physical health interventions, but BCBS will reimburse your nature-based psychotherapist. So we therapists can bill insurance. It's just an alternate office location. So in that sense, it does exist already.
Thank you, Callie. That's very good to know. There was another hand over here.
What advice would you give to like people who don't feel safe out in nature? Because I'm in a class this semester and we've been talking about that. Like, what do you do if you don't feel safe out in nature because of like historically, like bad things have happened?
That's a really good question, and I appreciate your candor in asking the question. I wonder if there might be some starting points, and I don't have expertise in this area, so I'm stipulating. I wonder if exploring an indoor place like the conservatory at the Botanical Gardens might be a place to start, or even some of the display gardens at the Botanical Gardens. There are, what I have loved and appreciated is the range of spaces that go from very cultivated to more natural, and then out on the trails, more typical trail experience. So I wonder if some of those might be things to check out. And my colleague is suggesting organized walk with a friend, if that might be of interest too.
That's exactly what I was going to share, is get a friend to go with you, make a pact that it's going to be a Nature RX experience, it's going to be a mindfulness experience, and even with a group of people.
Yeah, I would love to add to that. I work for Adventure Leadership, and we work with a lot of really diverse populations that have different relationships with nature that aren't always positive. And this is something that I'm still learning, of course. But some things that helpful. There we go. Some things that we have found really helpful in my experience are all of the things mentioned so far. That sort of doing things in community. The Botanical Gardens is such an awesome resource. But additionally, we use a challenge by choice philosophy at Adventure Leadership, and we like to present nature as an option to people. I think, as Captain Newman said yesterday, everybody, nature's like a dose, and you need your own dose. Everybody's different. And so I think that presenting that option to people as something that they are in control of, like, hey, you want to walk down this path with me? You don't have to. And maybe they will, maybe they won't. And maybe once they walk down the path with you, if they choose to, maybe then they'll sit there for a little bit and spend some time there. And I've also found that identifying what is scary and what is not is really, really important. If you don't know anything about nature, everything's scary, everything's poison ivy, every bug is poisonous. And so identifying what things actually are the things to worry about and what aren't. We have participants at our Adventure Education Center that get really scared of daddy long legs spiders all the time. And so I just pick them up and I hold them and I'm like, whoa, this is so cool, look at this friend. And then participants are like, wait, can I hold it? And they go from being terrified to holding a spider in their hands in like 2 minutes. So I think just nurturing that curiosity and being open to people making choices for themselves in those spaces is super important.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And a question in the back.
Okay, I had to go look closer. I work as an educator interpreter at the Leslie Science and Nature Center, and just thinking about taking advantage of, for people that are nervous about going to guided walks and events at the county level or the nature centers available in the area. And thinking about having some interpreters even at the parks on campus in the diag, just looking at the trees there are very interesting trees there, as ways to get people to feel comfortable in a space that they can come back to that's close to where they are.
Thank you, Lisa.
Am I next?
Thanks so much. Thanks for asking that question, and just to know that there are many, many opportunities, and recognizing that we are here for you. So we at Mathi Nichols have these things called Wonder Walks, and they're really audience driven. So we check out, what do you want to do? What do you want to see? And you get to do that in community, in a group, and it's just an introduction. But I think just acknowledging some of the barriers is so important. So I really appreciate this conversation.
Likewise, I wanted to speak more broadly to nurturing wellness in communities and thinking about how public spaces have not been safe for particularly marginalized groups, and thinking about bystander intervention and what it looks like to just be creating that culture of safety as we are out in the community. And also likewise really appreciate naming this, because I know many people who will not go out into public spaces because of the current climate that we're in. So I think it's really important for us to be cognizant of our roles in creating safety as well.
Thank you. I think we have time for one last question or comment.
Hi, I'm the county naturalist, so I lead probably like 130 nature hikes a year, many of them meditation hikes all throughout the county. And what I've noticed is nature is really small and it's everywhere. It's not like it's out there in the wilderness. So people are nervous about going out into the forest or how that feels. You can bring it right here on campus, like in little nooks and crannies where you start to plant native plants. And then when you build it, the nature comes to you, and then it becomes this incidental experience along the way of noticing beauty. And it's everywhere, because it really is everywhere. And just a little 10-foot by 10-foot pollinator garden can be so filled with life. And you bring that beauty, those butterflies and that life right here to campus, like right in front of the Natural History Museum is a great example of this. And it's magical. And so for people that don't have the time to, in their busy lives, it's just like it can happen right here.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for being here today. We are going to transition to our next panel, which is the Lightning Talks panel.
We're a little tight on time, so we're going to skip a wellness break, but please use the bathroom, excuse yourself. Be well. We have some quick lightning talks that will cover a variety of wonderful topics and a variety of wonderful people. These 5 speakers represent an array of units across campus. Nate Phipps from the Marsall School of Education, Tony Kolenik from Mathi Botanical Gardens and Nichols Arboretum, Chris Eagle from Information Technology Services, Julie Piazza from the Michigan Medicine Office of Patient Experience, and Callie England from Adventure Leadership in the School of Social Work. I want to preemptively thank our wonderful Lightning Talk speakers for sharing their experiences and wisdom with us, and I hope in the audience we can find inspiration and wonder in their words and presentations. I've had the pleasure of getting to know these people while planning this symposium, and I feel so grateful to give them a platform to share their expertise. And to kick us off, I'd welcome Nate Phipps.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to try to talk to you about how to not skip your wellness breaks. And it fits really well, as if it was planned, to other speakers before, how to formalize social prescribing, how to make room for these habits, how to make small moments in busy lives. So my name is Nate Phipps. I'm from the Marsall Family School of Education, recently renamed. And I'm here to talk to you about intentional wellness, or getting more done and feeling better doing it. So thank you for having me. This was actually born out of the seed was planted of this talk and a larger one I've given when Sam presented to a Green Team meeting in May last year, or sometime around there. So it's come full circle. So our goals today: defining intentional wellness. What the heck does that mean? Describing the challenges of attention, distraction, and productivity in our sort of modern work and lives. Sharing 2 specific strategies to get more done while feeling better at work and at home, and to try to do this in less than 10 minutes. So why me? I am a serial procrastinator, and I have been for as long as I've been sort of working in professional settings, and I'm a self-distractor, and I also just want to continue to improve my emotional regulation. That seems like a good time of life to do that. And this stuff has helped me a lot, and so this is stuff that I've been trying out and experimenting with over the last couple of years, and it's been really impactful for me, and I think it could be impactful for you too. It's credit to Cal Newport, things like his book Deep Work, really how to sort of change your work habits to feel better, be more productive, and then sort of bringing that together with what we know about health and wellness and what supports sort of good habits. So intentional wellness, what is intentional wellness? It's something I made up. It's a set of words that, to me, really captured what I was trying to do and how I was feeling. And it, for me, brings together 3 things. Wellness, which is just feeling good. Productivity, getting things done that we need to get done. And then intentionality, which is sort of knowing why and what to do to support productivity and wellness, and being really planful about those things. So let's talk about joyless urgency. I have a couple times where I'm going to ask for feedback and participation, so get ready. So you've probably heard of this idea of time scarcity, but you may not have heard of this idea of time abundance or time bounty. And if you haven't, it's an important thing to think about. It's sort of the balance of that idea of time scarcity, which is probably where most of us live. So I'm going to ask you to put your hands up very briefly. Sort of Likert scale, 5 fingers would be if you feel like right now you have a lot of extra time in your life. 1 would be feeling like you have very, very little time, and 3 is somewhere in the middle, and then you have other fingers as well. So put your hands up. Where are you feeling right now? Okay. Sam's got a 1. He's been planning a symposium. A 5. I love that. Great. So as suspected, mostly skewing to the scarcity side of the scale. A couple folks with 4s and 5s. You should talk to them later and find out what they're doing, and then give them something to do, perhaps. No, but the idea is that we want to move ourselves to the time abundance mindset and think about how we functionally can do that in busy lives. So there's this thing called the efficiency trap, and it's the concept is from Oliver Burkeman from his book 4,000 Weeks, which is the length of an 80-year life. And so his book is about how to take full advantage of that. The efficiency trap is this idea that rendering yourself more efficient won't generally result in the feeling of having enough time, because the demands will increase to offset any benefits. I don't know about you, but I have not seen the end of a to-do list in as long as I can remember. It doesn't exist. And so the idea, from Oliver Burkeman, is that we embrace limits and embrace buffers. Because if you are never going to reach the end of a to-do list, if you're never going to have sort of nothing to do and reach that time where you have enough time, it's almost liberating. And you can sort of organize your days with the understanding that you definitely will not have enough time to do everything you want to do. So I want to sort of challenge you to take that up as inspiration and as sort of liberation from those things that you want to do and need to do. We also, at the same time, in sort of modern work and modern life, there's an attention crisis, right? So attention is a flashlight. That's something that is a mantra for me. We only have one flashlight, and our attention can only shine on one thing at a time. We try to shine it everywhere. We try to move it around. We try to do what we think is multitasking, but which is also actually task switching. So you can't really do two things at a time. You can do two things at a time really poorly, or you can do one thing at a time like sort of good. But you can switch between things, but not do two things at a time. And of course, we're distracted, right? So we're distracted by devices, joyful distractions, other people coming to visit you, knock on your door, self-distraction. I like to look at Facebook Marketplace for things that I probably don't need. But so there's lots of distractions in the world. And that leads to a spirit of joyless urgency. I heard some people respond to that phrase when I put it up, and it hit me deeply when I first encountered it. This is Marilyn Robinson. The larger quote, interestingly, and probably interesting to some of you, is that it's a real argument for the humanities and against sort of a market-driven approach to learning and education. But it also describes, I think, just modern life. And so what do we do? How do we move away from joyless urgency, move towards time abundance? Two strategies. One focused on productivity and one focused on wellness, and my attempt is to sort of bring them together. So time blocking. This might be familiar to some. You might even do it. It's a concept that's pretty simple, but not necessarily easy. You can think of it as advanced calendaring. And my challenge to you is not to say, oh, I already do that. Like, there's nothing here for me. It's to do it a little differently, do it better, sort of try to do it with more fidelity, and try to do it in service of wellness. So time blocking has 4 elements. One is just keeping a daily schedule. That's something most of us probably do, but it's being consistent and really doing this as sort of part of your bedrock, like how you live your life. So keeping a daily schedule, whether it be digital or analog. Then allocating tasks across your day and schedule. Whether you're a student, whether you're a staff person, faculty, you generally are going to be keeping hours where you're trying to do things, and those tasks should be allocated with time blocks throughout your day. Some of those time blocks are going to be more focused, right? They're going to require a different type of attention and dedicated focus. Those should be called out, and those should be sort of, protected, probably longer, probably done in a place that promotes that sort of attention and focus and deep work. And then finally, really important to all this is reviewing and adjusting. So you're not going to just sort of set it and forget it necessarily. You're going to sort of check in midday, check in the end of day, move things in real time, right? So it's being not perfect about your schedule. It's a best guess, and then you sort of run with it and roll with how things go. So reviewing and adjusting is an important facilitator. So another participation moment. What do you notice about this schedule? This is my day from some October week. What do you notice about it? Just what jumps out? You just call it out. It's packed. It's color-coded. Anything else? There's a shutdown block. I didn't hear that one. Yeah, there's many blocks, but not any sort of big ones. Anything else? What's that? Ah, yes, there's a little sliver in there for walking or meditating. Great, you all are top marks. So let's sort of dissect this very, very quickly. There's some meetings. There's just some times where I'm meeting with people. That's a part of our day-to-day. It's a part of my day-to-day. There's focus time, so these are times where I needed to review reports. I blocked an hour for each. I needed to sort of settle in. I needed to read it, maybe I think it was 15 pages or something. I had to provide feedback, comments, and then get an email out to the person who wrote it to say like, hey, this is what I think. There's a wellness break in there. That's our next tip. So putting a block of time in my schedule strategically to take a break. Maybe I thought I would need it then. Maybe that's the only room I had, but it was, this is my typical wellness break, is either a walk or a meditation. East Quad is my favorite spot to go because I'm at the Marcel Family School of Ed. You have work blocking. So this is like a meta block. Like this is a block that I would block other work blocks further into the week and say like, okay, what did I get done? What do I still need to do? Want to fill up that schedule and time block other days. And then somebody pointed out there's a shutdown routine. So it's like, what didn't I get done that I thought I would get done that I need to move to a different day? What do I need to extend? Where do I need to be tomorrow in a world where we're sort of moving between offices and places? Like, am I in the office? Am I home? Do I need to build in travel time for whatever reason? So just sort of checking in and sort of bedding down your professional brain for the day allows you to be present at night, perhaps with family, friends, doing other things. So here are my tips. Block your whole day, block top to bottom, right? So it's okay to have some empty space. You can see I had some empty space here, but really the idea is that you're filling in your entire day. Include transition times, like if you need to travel, if you need to focus after a meeting, if you need 15 minutes to take notes. You can do things to buffer against people just gobbling up your calendar. Consider using different colors. Google Calendars have great features now where you can have, calendars can have colors, but now you can have, within your own calendar, you can label, so each of the colors you saw corresponded to sort of different things. Stay flexible ahead of the day and throughout the day, and consider time for blocking shutdowns and looking ahead. Wellness breaks. This is something that clearly is sort of resonant with the things we're talking about. I'm going to give you 3 examples of wellness breaks, and then talk about this thing called Nature RX. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. So walking. I don't know that I need to say more. Walking is the best thing you can do to promote health, wellness, emotional regulation, to get ideas out, walking meditations, or just sort of thinking about a problem. The physiology of your brain and body is that when you engage your body in these sort of larger movements, it opens up pathways in your brain. So if you're stuck on something, take a walk. High quality connections. So this comes out of work at the Ross School. Some of you may have heard of this. The idea is there's these short positive interactions between individuals that promote well-being, organizational commitment, and overall performance. Basically, it's like, think of it as a water cooler conversation that sort of goes beyond the like, what did you watch on TV last night? And sort of seeds deeper connections and both promotes and gives you back energy. Meditation. I think you did a mindfulness exercise last night. This is the one that I've gravitated most towards and has been really powerful for me. A note on meditation. If you're not there yet, meditation does still have a whiff of sort of new aginess. I think folks can feel a little, I know I felt a little sort of like averse, let's say, but people will go to the gym, pay lots of money each month to work out with weird machinery and do sort of all these odd things. Meditation is the equivalent for your brain. It's a bicep curl for your mind. And you should consider having that as part of a practice. There's no wrong way to meditate, and there's lots of ways that are really accessible. So please consider that. And then finally, Nature RX is like the multiplier effect, right? So you can do all of the things I just described in nature. You can talk to a friend in nature. You can take a walk in nature. You can meditate in nature. Inside or outside. Like I said, I like to go to East Quad, and I'm like the weird, all the students are out there studying, and I'm the weird guy meditating in the sort of corner there. But it's such a beautiful natural space, and it's right across the street from my office. So, yeah. In closing, if you're already doing some of this stuff, try to be better. Don't try to be perfect. I like to say you should be an improvementist, not a perfectionist. And so with all of these things, and really all things in life, try better over perfect. There's no such thing as perfect. This is a quote that I've always loved, but it just seems particularly apt given the topic of my talk and then the larger conversation. This is by E.B. White. I rise in the morning torn between a desire to improve the world and a desire to enjoy the world, and this makes it hard to plan the day. That's a picture of E.B. White's writing shed. There's a whole blog called Shed Work where you can look at people's writing sheds. And you can see this is right on the coast. It's a beautiful spot, and it's meant to sort of inspire us to find a little corner of our own to feel better. Sorry about the links. They're hot links, so they turned a weird color. But there's a bunch of homework here, resources, things like Rest is Resistance. If you've not heard of the NAP Ministry, you should look into the NAP Ministry by Tricia Hersey. And then finally, thank you all for having me here and letting me talk at you. And thanks for putting this on, Sam. This is great.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Tony Kalenic. I'm the director of Mathi Botanical Gardens and Nichols Arboretum. And get out of my head. The joyless urgency thing. It's funny because the natural reaction maybe not natural reaction, but a reaction, a common reaction is to then go try and counteract it with like cheap dopamine. You know, that junk food dopamine of like, for me, it's going and looking on like reverb.com for used guitars, you know, and things like that. But other people have their own thing, you know. Nonetheless, let's talk about some more expensive dopamine for a moment. Or maybe higher quality, high fiber dopamine. I don't know. Water soluble fiber dopamine. All right. Just a quick pinch about us. So of the university's 3,000 or so acres, the Ann Arbor campus, we manage the equivalent of 841, about 525,000 annual visitors, most of which is the university community and of course our surrounding Ann Arbor community, but there's regional and national and international draw as well. We're built into the curricular experience of about 3,200 students each year, more than 4,000 K-12 partnerships, 16 to 20,000 early learners enjoying our many nature play-based activities, tons of internships, faculty partners, et cetera. I think the important note here is that a lot of that acreage is right in the heart of campus. 126 of those sit right between the School of Public Health and a cemetery and Michigan Medicine. Seems kind of perfectly located for a clinical trial of some kind, right? Or some kind of study. I mean, there have been studies, but I think we're talking about a more mature next step. And I want to introduce what some of that could look like. I guess just one quick general comment on some of the themes that Dr. Ernst mentioned and Nate did as well, and Katie. Our current educational model is one in which we teach people to hyper-specialize and to be transferable and to all different kind of geographical and cultural contexts. And that's great. But when the liberal arts higher education model was created, people had an anchor in place. They had a sense of where they were. And I'm not trying to pretend it was perfect or anything like that. I'm not trying to cast the past as any kind of utopia. But I am saying that there was a body of knowledge and connection there that we don't prioritize or even necessarily have the skills to recognize. So we don't think about ourselves in relationship to place or as part of nature. So when I think about the role that this discussion, there's a meta arc in the background for me, like a sine wave or something about our closeness and distance to our own naturehood. You know, like it's like, well, how are we going to protect the Ganges? Well, we use legal structures, like give it personhood. It's like, no, actually what we need to do is provide ourselves naturehood in ways that aren't inherently extractive or racist or, you know, all the things. Okay. And I think that's part of that distance. You know, when people leave, if you're lucky enough to grow up with a community and a sense of place, and then you come to a university and you're transient and hyper-specialized, I think place is a practice. You know, and I don't care, you could come from another part of it, you could be an international student, you could be from anywhere on planet Earth, but if you don't keep place as a practice, then you're going to be worse at it when you return to wherever or find your next place. And you will not gain by in the interim the health benefits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That this is a particularly strong choir that I don't need to preach to. Okay. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep going here. So we've heard about people entering into nature, into natural spaces, as if they are themselves wild, like they just exist on their own. They don't. The Arb doesn't just exist on its own. It was, I mean, the concept of wildness, of wild nature, is itself a bit of a fallacy, right? And it erases a lot of culture's long-term participation, our species' participation, and the complexities within our own species about their own relative relationships to nature. I could go on and on. I'm not going to. The point is that we don't need to just be recipients of the natural world, but we are participants by being alive, and we can shape some. I mean, I think there's at the base of the triangle, at the base of our pyramid, is prescribing or sending ways or finding ways to very intentionally immerse ourselves in the natural world, and we can reap physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and all the other kinds of health benefits. But there are other ways that we can reshape the natural world or reshape our relationship to it to get a little closer to that. So you should all be familiar with this by now if you're not, but this graphic is the 8 dimensions of health as defined by the Wellbeing Collective here on campus. We at the Botanical Gardens and Arboretum, and I think this is true for Nature RX writ large, aren't just in the mental health or the environmental health side of this. There's connections across all of these that don't necessarily fit into a lightning talk. No, I don't know why this color got shifted. Shoot. Well, we're engaged in a project right now called Landscapes of Wellness with our, and some of our collaborators are in the room. I've gotten to know some great folks like Connor and Shire and Christine Sedow and others that I've been able to meet with a few times. And over the course of the last 2 years, we've internally been working to rethink the 204 zones or subzones of our collections, our landscapes that we manage, and try to create intentional experiences for and with community in. And 18 of those 204 sites, these 18 are going to be remade, rethought. We'll actually try and change the hardscape, the plant lists, but also the kind of intentional experience making, the user-centered design of it with mental health professionals, with people who are engaged in this space, who understand the relationship from a professional space, that same place that neither Dr. Ernst nor myself understand fully in any way. I mean, I'm a tourist in mental health. But I do know how to help connect the natural world to that world. And these 18 spaces. So I'll give you a couple examples of those. This is a space, it's a council ring, this shape is called, within a place called Heathdale. It's right when you go into the Arboretum at the Washington Heights entrance, for those of you that are familiar, you go away from the hospital, through the Peony Garden, and then you go down to that bowl. This is your first moment for nature immersion in the Arboretum. This is a place where the sound of the traffic, because you go down into a bowl, it's like, shoo, right? Now we, historically at the Arboretum, when you go down into that bowl, you walk down there, and most of you won't know it, because what did Callie say? Everything's weeds, and everything's poison ivy. But the plants down there are, the plant list down there, or maybe it was her, sorry. I don't know who it was. The plant list down there, it's the plants of Appalachia. We teach you about the plants of Appalachia. And that's great. That's nice. But that isn't how people use it, right? It doesn't have a relationship to the use case. It has a relationship to what we valued at one point. So the goal here is we're not going to kill plants or anything like that, but the kind of we can layer other information without erasing the plants of Appalachia. We can add other layers, right? We can add self-guided mental health interventions based on what professional practitioners are teaching us and showing us. We could have playlists designed by, curated by students or staff. We could have community-led programming, right? That's guided meditations, whatever, right? These things can exist in natural spaces with great intentionality. Another quick example, we're working with a faculty member named Katie Newell and a group of others in mental health services here on campus and in the community there's a garden, not a garden, actually, it's a little grove called Magnolia Glade at the Arboretum. And it is a place where the nurses and the staff of the NICU year over year for more than a decade or two have been donating a tree in honor of those that didn't make it in the birthing process or for other reasons. And we don't tell you that. That's not a story you get to hear at the Arboretum. That's not, and honestly, it's also not our story to tell. But the reality is right now it's kind of a random grove of magnolia trees with little context or intentional experience wrapped around it. So the question becomes, how do we wrap an intentional experience around it that is healing and inherently built a landscape of wellness, i.e. the whole name of this project. So Katie, this faculty member in architecture, does a lot of work with liminal spaces in the built environment, materials, biophysical feedback, and grieving and emotional health and well-being. that kind of work can create these these between structures that are at once private and public, at once opaque and translucent, at once natural and built, right? So there's an in-betweenness, the liminality of grieving is reflected in the architecture, and she's done enough work in this space to have with epidemiologists to understand the way that material choice works with physical health, mental health, emotional processing. And finally, there are some places where we see this work, these 18 sites unfolding primarily across campus, across our Arboretum, and this is the Botanical Gardens, in ways that I think would be really, really, really interesting to start testing, right? To work with the professionals on campus and beyond to redesign and put into, I don't know if it's an RTC or some kind of study design, but I think we need that kind of work to grow so that we can actually pursue that level of what did Katie say with Blue Cross Blue Shield and others. So with that, thank you. And I'm going to skip past this part because I know that I'm over time and we're already over time. And we have a whole section on social prescribing later that I hope you'll stick around for. Thanks.
Hey everybody. I'm Chris Siegel from Information and Technology Services, and they're going to give me 10 minutes, which is very little amount of time, to talk about some of my involvement with NatureRx over the last few years. Haha, this works. So in late 2021, I joined UM's Voices of the Staff. And before I get into the meat of my presentation, I want to give a shout out to Voices. Before being invited to join, I didn't know much about them, but they're a really well-organized community that sponsors a lot of valuable initiatives. These initiatives run the gamut from promoting flexible work to partnering with them Healthy to nurture employee well-being, and for what we're here today to talk about, NatureRx, specific projects like NatureRx. And at one of my very first Voices staff meetings, I saw a presentation on a very early rendition of NatureRx by Katie Stannard and Teresa Maddox. And they had worked with staff, Katie talked about it earlier today, and they put together a very early kind of prototype of over 100 places on or near campus where a person, and at the time their slogan was, could get a dose of nature. So I don't have any pictures of what it looked like, but they had made this a database, and they put it in this tool called ArcGIS. And this is an example of what ArcGIS looks like. It's not actually NatureRx, but it's a really powerful system that is used for global information system mapping, location mapping inside a tool. And it was a really great way to store the information that they gathered, but it didn't really lend itself to an application that could be used by everyone. You can see it's primarily a data analytics tool, not really designed to be an end user application. And Katie and Teresa were looking for a path to turn their NatureRx prototype into a full-fledged app that was available to the entire University of Michigan community. And I was fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time, and I was able to connect them with the team that runs within ITS that runs the Michigan mobile app. And ITS agreed to take on NatureRx free of charge, redesign it, and put it in the Michigan app. The two groups began working on a prototype. They met every week. They shared these ideas, and then in between times, I think the NatureRx team would go gather more ideas, and the ITS team would take the ideas that they talked about and try to program them into the computer. And 6 or 7 months later, they had a very early version. This was in June of 2022, available for public use. And I don't know if everybody in here is familiar with what NatureRx looks like, but at the time, it looked like this. This was a really early version. It had lots of room for improvements. And the NatureRx team put together a document that they called the Project Wish List. Now that wish list is still in use. It's got dozens of items on it. There have been many items pulled off it as they were completed, but for every item pulled off it, this team has more ideas, and they put more ideas on it. And we'll talk about it in a bit, but today it still has dozens of items left on it. In the early days, there were some pretty basic items on this wish list. Things like go through the name of every location and make sure that it has the actual official name that the university would give to that location. Or go through the descriptions of every single item and make sure that it has things like accessibility or how accessible the different elements of a location might be. And so here's I'm going to show you a couple of before and after screenshots to give you a feel of how much improvement NatureRx has received since those early versions. This is the landing screen. You can see that most of the functions, if you go through them and read the text, are on both pages, but I think you'll agree the new version is just a bit more inviting and maybe a little more in line with the relaxing nature of NatureRx. And this is the main location screen. The original version was a bit clunky to use. It was driven from a list of text locations. And today, it's centered on the map where the locations are available at the bottom. You can see those. I don't have a pointer, but you can see them at the bottom. And just, much more integrated, find the stuff by you. I know this is how I use NatureRx, is whenever I'm on campus and I have a few minutes, I'm like, what's around me? And so it works really well that way. So in early 2023, the team tackled one of the really big items on the wish list. They wanted to get a quality photo of every single location in NatureRx. At the time, the photos were a bit scattershot. Some had been taken by the NatureRx team. Some had been pulled from websites or other media. And a fair number of the locations didn't have a photo at all. So the team built this spreadsheet. They put every single location on the spreadsheet, and then we started going through the spreadsheet and knocking off the photos, and then filling out the spreadsheet if the photos got done. We're lucky enough to have Chris Headley right here in the front row. Chris did yeoman's work. I'm guessing that probably about 3/4 of the locations were photographed by Chris, and any of the locations that weren't, if they don't suck, the photos, it's because Chris coached us all on how we could take a good photo if we were out taking these. So by October of last year, the spreadsheet was mostly filled out. The team had photos of every location, but I don't know, maybe 10 or so. And as you can imagine, these are the locations that are not trafficked. They're hard to find. They're the ones that people don't go to. And so I decided that the next free day that I had, I was going to go out and take some photos of these last lagging locations. So November 9th, 2023, 1 year ago tomorrow, as it turns out, was that day. I had a few free hours in the afternoon, and the weather promised to be unseasonably nice for November in Michigan. As I recall, I took a few photos on my way to the locations here, and you can kind of see it was just one of those days that really makes you appreciate how blessed and lucky we are to be working at one of the great university campuses in America. I think the temperature was about 55. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, just impossibly blue, And actually, if anybody was outside today, it reminds me a lot of, we got another day a year later, just about like that. The students were, it's a great time to be a student right now because you've been here long enough to get comfortable with campus, but not so long that we're at the end of the term and you got to deal with all the stress of the term end things. So they were all around campus. I remember that the trees were in the closing stages of shedding their leaves, and wherever you walked, the leaves swirled around your feet. You can see some of them here. So here are a couple of the photos that I took that day. I didn't label them, but feel free to clap if you recognize any of these. These, of course, were the places that were less traveled, but in a way, even better for Nature RX for getting a little bit of a recharge because they're less traveled. I would encourage you to use Nature RX to go find some of these places. There's 115 of them in the app by my count, and each and every one has its own special charm. Some of them took a little while to find. As I said, they were the last 6, 10 or so. I remember crisscrossing back across campus trying to find them, or circling all the way around a building trying to find a little teeny tiny entrance into a courtyard somewhere. And at each one, I took a few minutes and I sat down and I meditated a little bit. I had my iPad and some of them, I read some emails. Emails are a lot easier to do when you're sitting outside in the sunshine, I will tell you. But some of them, I just took a few minutes to just recharge. And if I've had a more enjoyable afternoon in the last 5 or 10 years, I can't recall when it was. When I got back to the office, I was in a perfect state of mind. I was recharged and ready to take on the world. So Nature RX continues to evolve and improve, but the to-do list is still dozens of items long. The team is always looking for more people to join them and work on that list and add ideas of their own too. And as Katie pointed out, all of Nature RX is volunteer. And so it relies on volunteers to keep it moving forward. I will say during my involvement in Nature RX, I've gotten so much more out of it than I could ever put into it. I love that when I have a few minutes on campus, and in my job I spend a lot of time going around to different places on campus. I'll be in an unfamiliar spot, I'll have 20 minutes before my next meeting, and I pull up Nature RX, and I go find a place on campus where I can get a little recharge that I didn't even know existed, that I wouldn't have known without Nature RX. If you're all inclined, take a photo of this slide. The QR code takes you to a short form that you can fill out to be a volunteer, or talk to anyone from the Nature RX team today. Most of them have the little Nature RX shirts on. If you can see that, they're white shirts with a little cartoon on the front. I know everybody would love to have you join us. So thanks for your time.
Tag team. So I'm Julie Piazza. I'm a senior project manager with the Office of Patient Experience. It's really great to be here today. I also need to say that I am a certified child life specialist. So you see some of that training and experience and working in pediatrics for many years has influenced my work over time. But I'm just really privileged also to be part of this Nature RX team and sort of came about it before and then sort of evolved back into it. And now Chris was talking about the voices of the staff, and I just joined this year. I was like, gosh, this organization is so awesome. Like, I think I need to be involved. So I applied, and I'm on the Committee for Strategic Well-Being, so I'm excited about that. But I'm speaking today about the impact of this work in the healthcare arena. And honestly, you've seen, maybe you haven't seen this picture of Florence Nightingale, but she was definitely an influence in healthcare and really was one of the first to talk about a clinician, to talk about the importance of what you see in nature and beauty. She carried around a small owl in her pocket when she went to visit patients. So she kind of brought nature healing as well as animals as part of that. And today, we have pause for patients in our health system. And those wonderful dogs, facility dogs, are trained, especially to be emotionally supportive in that experience. So our early roots in healthcare, having that holistic approach, were truly important. Now, we really purposefully and intentionally, and all of the presentations have really kind of helped to build up to this. We know the benefits of nature. We feel good when we're in those spaces. So this is an image of the Cardiovascular Center's atrium. We're honest to say, many of us flock to in terms of a place to go. It's one of those spaces on the interior part of the app. But it really shows us in several studies about the human benefits of nature, physical health. You can increase your activity, you decrease diabetes, hypertension, you improve your sleep, you improve your community feeling and birth outcomes even. Benefits of nature for mental health we've heard about today. That's less depression, anxiety, managing our emotions, and increased focus and restorative. So there's lots of benefits, so it seems very natural. We're excited about this today. This image is new to the health system. It's in the University Hospital. The Gifts of Art organization within our hospital has beautified our hallways for many years and received grants, and they got a grant to be able to have this lighting to help bring in the sunshine in a new way and have that sense of color. And we have a table, so please visit that table and learn more about that. But respite through nature environments, and that kind of, sorry, did a little number on the screen here, but over 10 years in the making. So now our new children's hospital is actually 12 years old. In the beginning of those days, and many design elements within the healthcare institutions, we looked for ways to bring nature indoors. We have a terrazzo floor that has fossils that depict Michigan oriented species, and we have lots of glass, we have lots of color, we have lots of art, and we actually have images of the Arboretum in our clinic areas. But what we were finding was, and this is over many years of work and study and awareness, is that many of our patients and families, and quite frankly our staff, didn't know it was for them. They looked out a window, they came into work or left work, and they appreciated the trees. But to Tony's point, we have lots of acreage right there. So we actually looked at that and considered that and tried to bring that connection in more. We did activities with staff. What does a healing environment mean to you? Hands down, the number one theme was nature. People made collages, they got involved, we had this big momentum, and then many of our people that were involved in some of that work joined voices of the staff and started propelling some of this effort, which is really great. We had guided walks from the Family Center. So those are things that we were inspired by actually some of our across the pond neighbors who had instilled volunteers to do that guided work, like in England. We started a courtyard nature program and had butterfly releases as part of Butterfly Exploring, worked with facilities and planted pollinator attracting plants in our courtyards. They were saying, we're going to buy the plants anyway, let's do something like this. So we have signage, we have releases twice a year, June and September. And of course, the pandemic threw a little wrench in that, and we're working towards getting a lot of these programs back. But we have brought butterfly chrysalis inside, so kids and families can release those butterflies once they're fully developed and be a part of nature. We looked at ways that we could connect our healthcare hallways because staff, patients, and families had said, nature is really healing, and there's nature right outside. There's a Huron River right outside. So this is actually depicting murals as children and adults are going off to surgery in the CNW, Children and Women's Hospital. So these images helped with wayfinding to the operating rooms, and also a frog that was a repurposed, recycled vacuum cleaner parts and automotive parts became a home base for people because our halls in the very beginning were called champagne white, and we did, and they were very beige, and people didn't, they got lost, frankly, until we had murals and things like that to depict. The murals and the portholes actually depict community areas like the Michigan Theater, the Nichols Arboretum, Distraction Discovery, the stadium, and provide a calming environment. We worked with artists, local artists, and got grants to be able to do murals like this in the blood draw area. If you can find the hidden words there in the flowers and the trees. And it provided an alternative focus, and we could have children and adults looking for things while they were waiting for a blood draw, which is sometimes a scary experience. And nearby nature, I think I got the acreage off by 3, but the nearby nature of the Nichols Arboretum, and just the permission and opportunity, and I love the connection to thinking about those spaces in new ways, to go and see, this is a place for you. This is an immersive place. You can take a break. You got some just really challenging news about your family, so if you need to take a moment and sit on a bench and look at nature, it's grounding. I don't know about you, but I often carry a rock in my pocket to make sure that I'm grounding myself. So just being immersed in a different color. We always try and heighten awareness to the peony gardens and have walks and get staff. The whole Mott Perioperative OR had a staff meeting, and they all met for their 7 o'clock meeting in the ARB and went through the peony gardens for a walk, which was really neat. The Huron River, just right outside their window again, and we now have a film that says what's just outside your window, and many of these places are shown and imaged. It's on our Get Well network in the Children and Women's Hospital. But I think one of the key things, and many people have talked about it today, is just the situation we're in the connection that we have and the opportunities we have for that starts with awareness, looking for it, seeing it, making sure it's happening, and then providing access to it. And that's where we look to you all today to help us propel that effort and become champions. And look for opportunities of ways, excuse me, that we can connect opportunities and provide and encourage that well-being. It's a step in that process. And Nature RX helps us get there. Mindfulness mandalas is an activity that we provided at our table last evening. It's still up today if you want to take a look at that. It's an event to support nature. This is a way to support nature and healing, and it's something that's, again, you can just pick up a few leaves and flowers or shells or have a collection at your desk where you could make one of these. I think hugging trees often helps ground us. I was glad to hear that Captain Newman did that, and I do that too. It just really provides stability and comfort when there are no words. And this was a poem that I wrote in a very difficult time. Grateful for moments to reflect, to breathe, taking in freshness, exhaling those moments when choices were difficult, taking on encouragement as it showered from unexpected places, feeling lighter because someone cared, listened, loved, even when it wasn't easy, especially then. And I would just encourage you to take off with nature, to take those steps, start small. I love Atomic Habits by James Clear, and I think he, gives a really good point of start small, put your shoes out, or just challenge yourself to take a 5-minute walk or a 3-minute walk, and focus on a leaf or a flower or a cloud, or just look at it for 30 seconds, and then find that stone and put it in your pocket as a grounding symbol. When we stay rooted in this reflection, we can, watch for opportunities. We're more aware. It helps us to focus with that, and it helps us also to find that ground beneath our feet. So thank you so much. The Office of Patient Experience is happy to work with you and be partners. Thank you.
Yeah, that's different than how it looked last night. That's okay. So let's just take a moment, maybe stand up, maybe take a breath, maybe shake it out. Like we've been sitting for a while. And I would invite you to notice that you're an animal. Right? Oh, yeah, I think I'm seeing some claws. Yes, yes. So you can claw it out, you can shake it out, you could growl or howl it out if you need to. Yeah. I love the audience that is already bought in and is going to play along. Makes my job a lot easier. Welcome back to your body. So hi, I'm Callie England. I'm a clinical social worker. I hang out with Adventure Leadership. You're going to hear more from them later. You're going to go outside and play with them later. I teach at the School of Social Work, Adventure Therapy, and I am a clinical social worker in private practice. To my knowledge, I was the first adventure therapist in private practice in the Midwest. Now, that's not to say I'm the first adventure therapist in private practice. I have a ton of really cool colleagues. They're just out west, where there's like bigger adventure. Here in Michigan, our adventure is exploring the friendly forest. You know, we flatlanders, we got to find the adventure where we can. But that is the perspective that I'm coming from, is clinical practice, one-on-one and with groups. So this entire event is like kind of funny. Like it's kind of ironic that here we are investing a lot of time and thought into sort of proving, like developing the evidence that this works. Like, has anybody else been struck by the irony of that? Right? Okay, yeah. Good. Preaching to the choir. So let's take a moment and think about where in your lineage, where in your ancestry, where in your life. So maybe this is your lifetime, you'll have an answer to this. Maybe you're gonna have to think back a generation or two, or maybe 1,000 years. But where did you or your people lose your inherent connection to nature? Where did it go wrong? And I would also invite you to notice what's happening in your body as you do that contemplation. It might not feel good, and that's okay. We can sit with that. Because we all kind of intuitively know that we had this at some point, right? I don't think we would be in this room if we didn't already have an intuitive sense that nature is profoundly healing. And if we kind of like look back at every culture around the world, like pretty much every culture's original healing practices or spiritual practices are nature-based, right? And if we think about survival, like human survival, we know that we had to both understand nature, like which plants and animals can we safely eat, which ones are the poison ivy. Thank you, Lily, for getting us all on high alert about that. You know, we needed that nature connection for our very survival. And we also needed human connection for our very survival, right? Like hunter-gatherer times. You know, if the saber-toothed tiger was coming, you were going to do better if you were like in a group, right? You were going to be more likely to survive this like scary encounter with a predator in a group. You're more likely to survive the harsh winter or the famine if you were in a group. So we are hardwired both for that connection with nature and for that connection with each other. Yeah, you with me? Yeah, okay, cool. So where did it go wrong? Like, what led us to the need for an academic gathering to talk about, like, hey, by the way, nature is healing, and we're going to have to generate some evidence to get the third-party payers to reimburse us to do the thing that we all intuitively know is healing? Like, it's kind of a weird situation that we're in at this point, yeah? Okay. So I'm really grateful that there are those of you in this room doing that work, because that's not really my jam. I like had a research career, and I realized that I am not my best self when I'm in spreadsheet land all day. And some of you are much better at that than me. So I'm really grateful that we have the people doing that work. And I'm really curious about what the rest of us need to do to reclaim ourselves as part of nature. And how can we spread the word that if we can all reclaim ourselves as part of nature, health outcomes are going to get better? So I don't think this is necessarily a tough sell. So back in 2015, I was a very stressed out graduate student. I think we can all relate to that one. I was here in our school of social work in a really intensive field placement, learning to be a therapist, which the first couple of years learning to be a therapist, that's hard work. I think a lot of us can relate to the first couple of years doing something that's hard stuff. And so I just like needed something to lighten myself up. So I'm flipping through the course catalog and I'm like, oh, I kind of need a break. And I saw a course called Adventure Therapy. And I'm like, yes, that is the blow-off class that I need right now. And some of you might know Tony Alvarez. He's one of the pioneers in adventure therapy around the world, actually. He was teaching that class, and so I rolled my little self into class thinking I'm just going to kick back, skate through this one, easy peasy. And, well, spoiler alert, here I am as an adventure therapist. So that's not exactly what happened. But what I'm interested in is what happened in my deeply academic self, who I was back then, that recognized that adventure therapy would be good for me. Like there was something in me that knew, right? And so I'm curious, what is it in each of you that knows? How do you know that nature is healing? Where do you feel that in your body? So the body is an interesting one, right? The body is made of molecules. And these molecules used to build something else, right? Like we're just borrowing these molecules that make up our bodies, like for right now. So we have these molecules for 10, 20, 30, 90, 100 years if we're lucky, or if we're unlucky, depending on your perspective. We're borrowing these molecules, and then when we die, our bodies decompose or are burned or whatever we choose to happen to our bodies. And these molecules become something else. And before we had these bodies, these molecules were something else. What were the molecules in your body before? And this is an actual question, not rhetorical. Can somebody shout out, like, what were the molecules in your body? Stars. Yeah, we've got our Neil deGrasse Tyson reference. Stars. Yes. Yes, we are star stuff. What else are we? What could your molecules have been? Potatoes. Water. Dinosaurs. My favorite is mountains. Like my molecules, some of my molecules, maybe just one, but it's very likely that at least one of my molecules was a mountain. What does that feel like in your body to think of your molecules having been a river or a mountain? And also, not a rhetorical question. Can somebody shout it out? What's it feel like? Good, yeah. Calming. Connection. Thank you. I bribed that one. Connection. It feels like connection. So I'm gonna bookmark the connection. We're gonna come back to that in a moment. So there's all this research, and I believe Captain Newman alluded to this last night, that shows on college campuses, loneliness is an epidemic. And among I know the research on this one, that specifically among college students, loneliness is the greatest predictor of, shields up, suicidal ideation and suicidal completion. And I don't think that that's limited to the college student population, right? That's just the research I have in front of mind right now. So if we are so severely lacking connection, and we know that it can be difficult and scary to connect with others, but we also know evolutionarily that connecting with others was critical for our survival. That's where it gets really interesting to me. Like, what is getting in the way of that connection that is so inherently needed, so intuitively known to be needed? So think of evolution, like our bodies, our nervous systems have evolved as communal beings. We are hardwired for that connection so that we can survive the famine, the saber-toothed tiger, the cold winter. But our technology has moved so much faster in the past few decades than our bodies have, that all of a sudden our brains, our minds, our nervous systems are so deeply enmeshed in these screens. And like, technology is a miracle, right? It's like keeping us alive. It's doing so many wonderful things. So I'm not bashing that and saying we should just get rid of all of it, but We are so drawn in because, as Captain Newman pointed out, it's like literally physiologically addictive, the cheap dopamine hits, right? Our brains are in that addiction trap, but our bodies haven't evolved to make sense of that just yet. Our bodies still need and crave this connection. And ideally, we're getting it with each other, with these other human animals. But let's say that you're in a space where it's really hard for you. Maybe something has happened that's made it difficult for you to find human connection in that moment. Well, maybe you could take your molecules for a little bit of a walk to connect with other molecules that used to be your kin. If you feel that your molecule used to be a potato, go hang out with a potato. Okay, maybe that's a little bit odd, but like maybe you can go, hug that tree, spend time with the river, spend time with the mountain, and reconnect through that true connection of kinship rather than of otherness. Because this is one of my big concerns about sort of this evidence-based medicalized model of nature connection, is that I'm deeply concerned that it turns into us commodifying nature or seeing nature as other, rather than reorienting ourselves to seeing nature as kin and returning ourselves to part of nature, or even reclaiming ourselves as part of nature. And I just want to sit with that one for a moment, because it is so Western, it is so late stage capitalism to commodify nature and to say, yeah, we need a third party payer to reimburse, and we need to have all of these ways of getting funding to approach, all that stuff. And I totally get that that's where so many of us are, because that's the way the quote unquote healing system is set up right now. But what if we flip that around and return ourselves to being in harmony with nature? What if we identify ourselves as part of the nature, and maybe if we heal ourselves, it heals nature just as nature is healing us? What if it became a relationship of reciprocity? So I don't know, these are my musings. These are things that land in my body in a particular way, and I would invite you to notice how they land in your body. Notice how it lands in your heart. And I'd be curious for you to contemplate how reorienting your thoughts to yourself being part of nature might shift the way we have the conversation, might shift the way we approach more of the mainstream folks about what it means to find healing in nature, to find wellness in nature. So I'm going to bookend this one with kind of ending where we began. What would it be like to notice that you are an animal right now? So maybe that means like feeling your own heart beating. Maybe that means attending to your own breath. I don't think it's a coincidence that kind of every major spiritual practice like brings you back to focusing on the breath. And I've always heard it framed as kind of like a focal point, just something to focus on because it's always there. But like, what if those spiritual practices around the world evolved to focusing on the breath because it's actually reminding you that you're an animal? It's actually reminding you that you're part of nature. So let's take maybe just 10 seconds to again remember to feel deeply that you are an animal and you are part of nature, and I am too. And we're all here in this room together being nature. Thank you for playing with me. I'll see you later.
All right, I promised a wellness break, so I think we're here. We will take a 10-minute break, so we'll be back at 11:25-ish, and then we'll have a short paneling open question and answer for our wonderful lightning talks, and we can give them another big round of applause. All right, we're going to get started with just a short 15, 20-minute lightning talk Q&A. So our wonderful panelists can find a comfy seat up front. And this is just open for the audience. So if anything felt inspiring, you want to give a comment, raise your hand. We'll have some people with roving microphones. And you'll just have to toggle the microphone on.
Got it.
Great.
Sorry, hello, hello. Test, test, 1, 2. I'm just going to speak really loudly. I don't know if this is too general or anything, but it's like it seems like we're all kind of on a similar wavelength. We're at a huge distributed organization. What have people seen across this organization that would help align missions? So I was talking to Nate just as you're going up to the panel, being like, we're called Nature RX, but I was talking to Mark about Arts RX and Movement RX and how, and it's probably as easy as having Dr. Ernst be like, this is part of the wellness initiative, but what would be maybe easy low-hanging steps to align some of our things that we're on the same vibe about?
You were saying some things when we were sitting here that I thought were very interesting.
Tell me what it was.
Hello, hello, hello. Well, you were just saying about how we had to go around, how everything is indirect on the university, and getting these alignments can be very challenging.
That's something that you were mentioning, yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that there are. I think that over the time that I've seen more initiatives like Voices of the Staff and like Hacks with Friends and those kind of things that are open to everybody across the organization. And I think that that's just going to grow and as those things come into focus. And I don't know if could you talk to like about like different things that maybe the ITS is open to the public that you think that could maybe from a technical side promote, and maybe there's Voices of the Staff, like not necessarily technical people, and what are other things that people have heard about that could, kind of come together and align. And I'm going to take pictures while
All right, so I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent. Is this on? Can you hear me? No. This one's on? It might be me more than anything. You can hear me now, though? No? See?
Hello. Yeah, I think you're right.
Definitely says it's on, but I'm not getting anything. Let's try this. All right, we'll pass around a microphone then. Which is also not on. Now? Oh.
Check, check.
Okay. Yeah, now we've all got sound. Okay.
Answer to Sam, so I can take your pictures.
Okay. So I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent because we were talking about this during the break, about how decision making happens in academia. So we don't do it like the whole rest of the world does. The social scientists actually have a name for it, and they call it garbage can decision making. And it sounds like a really pejorative term, but it's actually something that was coined back in the 1970s when garbage cans were a lot cleaner than they are today. And the idea was that resources, ideas, and budget all get kind of thrown into a garbage can, and you can imagine that that garbage can gets mixed up, and every once in a while, some combination of ideas, resources, and budget all get glommed together. And then we pull that out and we make a decision to chase it. And so as opposed to the whole rest of the world that puts all their ideas in a row and then prioritizes them and then applies budget to them, that's not really how it works here at the university. And so, Christy, I think that, the answer to your question, and I know what I personally try to do really hard, is look for opportunities on campus where those three things are aligned and then run with them. And it's really hard to align those things by themselves. You kind of got to wait till somebody notices that, these types of events are the ways that sometimes we can encourage things to get aligned in that garbage can and then take off with them.
Can you hear me? I work at a school. I'm a staff member at the school. This is part of my job crafting, being here. And so that's something I have the privilege to do. I can carve out parts of my work, but what I would love to see is this stuff permeate through sort of paths of least resistance, like M Healthy Champions, established programs, Wellbeing Collective, which I know it exists there, but I would love to see it push from sort of the university level down into schools and colleges where there's people who are deputized, perhaps even their time is bought out at even a very small level to facilitate, a couple hours a week to sort of just keep this trickle going. I think a lot about staff development, professional development, staff well-being, because that's sort of where I live. And I would love to see people sort of explicitly empowered and given tools to sort of work at that level. There could be equivalents in faculty and student communities, but just sort of pushing down from the university level where there's expectations and, again, even funding perhaps to do the work that we're describing. Having a Nature RX coordinator at every school and college would be a wonderful thing, perhaps rolled into some other well-being role, but just sort of pushing down one level into sort of the units that we all work within. It's explicit endorsement. Again, if there's funds, it's sort of institutionally, it's getting sort of ensconced. And, this stuff is powerful and important for every individual. And we should sort of be thinking about all the individuals at UM. I'm again, have that staff sort of lens on, and I think staff are often sort of to the side sometimes, and that's something I think when we have healthy staff, they can provide care and for students and other constituencies. So that's what I'd like to see.
Yeah. I think this question is the question. It's probably the question that has brought most of us here today. And I fervently wish I had an answer. I can share from my experience. At Adventure Leadership, we've actually really been working on this for many years. And even the way that work started is I was an MSW student, as mentioned, taking my blow-off class, doing all these adventure-y things in class, and then got a mass email saying, hey, Adventure Leadership is hiring facilitators for a summer internship. And I'm like, oh, I could go do that and practice my skills. But even though they're all pretty much identical skill sets, the two units had never talked. There was no connection there. And so I became the connection point. And then our leadership, Jessa Lytle, one of our directors out there, approached me a few years later and was like, hey, let's create an MSW field placement program so we can more formalize that bridge. And then other stakeholders have similar interests. So then for a while we had a joint field placement with SAPAC, applying these nature-based and adventure modalities to clients that SAPAC serves. So the way we've approached it has been just that individual person to person and finding the one like-minded individual within a different unit who has the capacity, time, heart, and passion to make the collaboration happen. So it's really rewarding when it works, but that is unequivocally the very, very slow and very, very frustrating road that we've been on for about 6-7 years now.
I can also speak to that just from my experience in patient experience as well as when I was a clinician. I would look for students because I believe that education is that catalyst. If somebody's working on a project, oh my gosh, we've got to help them. We've got to do that, and so I think that was definitely a way that we could do it. I actually had two Masters of Public Health students, one that was in medical school doing her third year in the School of Public Health. And she was the one that helped us, get some of these initiatives, the film, all of these ways to create awareness. But I do think we are still siloed. It's very hard sometimes to work beyond, to your point, and I think, Callie, and just as many of us as we can raise up these champions. We've been super grateful to M Healthy because now, at least in the health system, we do have staff that have been designated as wellness individuals, wellness champions, and, they're available to come in and share a talk or whatever. You don't have to do it alone. So I think just rallying, to your point, Nate, just raising up that momentum.
Hi, my name is Martha, and I share the concerns about research maybe further commodifying nature in certain ways. On the other hand, at a research institution, I have the concern that is, let's build on research that's already been done. So, for instance, the Japanese practice called Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing, has had research done about frequency, about length of time, and different kinds of molecules that people take in and what it does to cortisol levels and things like that. And to a lesser extent, I think a little in the United States. Of course, I've only been able to read in English. Japanese was not one of the languages I've studied. So I was wondering, what do you all know about building on that kind of research that's already been done so that we're not infamously like reinventing the wheel?
I'll wing it. Okay, so thanks for that question, Martha. And it is, I guess I'll address the context first. First, Callie, what you talked about in the talk, that is precisely the kind of connectivity, and we all described it in different ways, right? I think I used the term naturehood instead of granting nature personhood the other way. You gave a much more kind of eloquent and deeper experience of that. You talked about it some. Julie, you even talked about it some. And human animals and the rest of the species understand what we're talking about. In the same way that corporations aren't people, universities aren't people. They speak an entirely different language and require, all of our systems, our health systems, require a different set. They require us to be polyglots who can talk about things with their intrinsic value and the instrumental value and everything in between. And this week, I don't feel like I have the luxury to not include the instrumental components, to be honest. So every language matters right now, including the quantitative ones, for me. And the goal there is ultimately the end of that. I mean, the goal of that isn't commodification. That's a means for me to bring that level of connectivity that can't be confined to language, that to more and more people and other human and non-human animals. So it's a means to an end, but it's an always unfolding means too, because the questions, and as we get better and integrate this practice, the need for more research will develop. It's a way of knowing, not the whole of being, something that we tend to do this thing in academia where we pretend that we aren't looking at the same world because we differentiate ourselves by disciplines, but I would argue that there's really only one subject of study, and the disciplines are organized by methodology, not by content area, so we can adjust how much we are in our methodology from not at all to completely and everything in between. you know, and we can adjust levels of constraint, and you can define the disciplines by these axes and ask different kinds of questions and yield different kinds of answers as a result, you know. So this is, as a university, the uni piece there, I'm about to step off of this pretty ramshackled soapbox. It calls on us to have all of those different languages and ways of knowing generated by these disciplines at the same time. To the extent we can apply it to the future of our collective biodiverse health and ways of being in the world, I'm here for it. So that doesn't answer your question, but I feel like I wasted enough time so that we don't have enough time to answer it now.
I can throw in just a 3-sentence something.
Yeah.
Within the adventure therapy community, Western adventure therapy kind of started in the 30s, 40s, 50s. And we didn't do any research because we're just not researchy types. We're like the crunchy granola types, so it's just not who we are. Until the 90s came along and there was a little bit of scandal in the adventure therapy world. And so our community recognized, like, oh, we're going to have to generate the evidence to just keep existing, to not let these bad players control the narrative. So in the 90s, some of the adventure therapists formed the Outdoor Behavioral Healthcare Council, our center, OBH Center, and that's been the home for a lot of adventure therapy, which includes nature-based and wilderness therapy. So there is a whole center run by, actually, one of the co-runners is a Michigan alum. Shout out, U of M Social Work. So that has existed since the 90s, and there's a pretty good body of evidence with control groups for example, therapy, standard practice indoor therapy versus outdoor therapy. So it's building, it's there, but the silos have maybe kept some of us from talking to each other and identifying where these pockets of research do exist.
Go ahead. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I feel compelled to say is that we don't need to pretend that we have to prove that this works. And that pulls through your conversation, and certainly there's instrumental ways, like important strategic instrumental ways that we have to show evidence, but we don't, like, I'm not a researcher, I don't think most of us here are researchers. We don't have to pretend that we need a research basis to promote this and sort of just like be super loud and clear and just like say it to as many people as we can that this works. It works because we know it works.
And we have 14.1 billion years on our side?
Yeah. So I really value the people who are doing the research on it. It's like, it's a good way. It's like, it's a part of the argument, but it's like, not, you don't need it for the argument.
And Nate, to your point, early on, like just a little background from like the Nature RX perspective was there was a conversation where we're just like, okay, we need to align with Michigan Medicine and do like a controlled study, like Captain Newman was like that's the gold standard, double-blind controlled study, and we met with the co-founder of Nature RX, Cornell University, and Don Raquel. And Don was telling us, no, there's a big body of research. You don't have to recreate that. And that just as, yes, there is a lot of research. Yes, there's a lot. It started in Japan. No, we don't know how to read Japanese. But we don't need to necessarily recreate it. If somebody has that goal, that would be cool. But getting the alignment, I think, getting that alignment across, I think, all these different, I think we're all on the same vibe. Some people call it Nature RX, some people call it, whatever RX. We do understand that this brings health. Do you?
Just to comment on it, which I think you're spot on. This is Captain Newman. My name's come up a little bit. I'm going to hide after this. No. What a joy to be here, by the way. This is so exciting and so invigorating, and I've got so many ideas popping that I'm dying. But I want to say that the data, the evidence are there. The issue with ParkRx, NatureRx, and doing a randomized controlled trial doesn't really have to do with the outcomes as much as integrating the systems into practice. Because the hardest part of it is getting clinicians who we trust, who we listen to. Dr. Ernst said it, when I tell them to take the medication, they do it. But the barriers, and we did a study at the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences, where I got my doctorate, did a needs assessment with the physicians, the TRICARE, the DOD physicians, on PARC prescriptions. Would you do this? What are the obstacles to doing a PARC prescription? We showed them the online database, how to do a prescription. We showed them the 1, 2, 3 step. And I said it yesterday. They looked at it, and when I talked about it yesterday, I didn't tell you the whole context. They said, it's a no-brainer. It's so easy to do. I would love to do this with my patients. There hasn't been a randomized controlled trial that gives me the ability to do it. I can give medicine because I have a trial, an FDA-approved way of doing it. So 2 reasons. 1, because it gives them the authority to do it, the science, the randomized controlled trial science to say, I'm allowed to do this, and I can even reduce the medication I'm giving him and increase, the pills I'm giving him and increase a prescription outdoors. 1. 2, it integrates a system into their practice that they don't have right now. So even the pilot itself, and I tell you this based on a conversation I had with Dr. Robert Czar, look him up. He started Park RX America. He was my senior advisor to me for a year at the National Park Service. I hired him for a year. Together, we started Park RX Day in 2016, and it's every year we do Park RX Day to raise awareness about Park prescription, nature, RX, it's all the same thing. But this is why we need it, not because, and clearly the University of Michigan is a wonderful place to do it. Why? Because we trust the University of Michigan, because it's an institution that has the gravitas. Because when a study comes out from University of Michigan with a randomized controlled trial that demonstrates that NatureRx works with students, with faculty, with clinicians, we should have clinicians using it too, that other people listen. That's why we do the research. It's not because we really need it, because we have billions of years of evidence behind it, but we've lost touch with it. And guess what we're up against? A very powerful pharmaceutical companies that have control over our lives. Because guess what's out in front of us, right all around us, in the nature that's around us? Medicine. So that's why I think that we need it, even though we don't.
Hello, everyone. My name is Angelica Bages, and I'm actually coming from the Beale Botanical Garden at the other school. But I really, yes, from Michigan State University. But I really do appreciate the approaches that the University of Michigan has been taking when we're thinking about wellness and the role of nature in that. At Beale, we also have a well-being program that we're really trying to start up. But one of the biggest things I feel like that I've come into thinking about when we're thinking about this sense of well-being and belongingness in nature and the different lived experiences that different communities have in these spaces, I'm wondering if there's any ways or programs or approaches that you all have come up with when it comes to building that sense of belongingness and having like that sense of representation in some spaces, especially when it comes to nature, because sometimes being from different cultures and different backgrounds, like going out into nature can feel very unsafe and unwelcoming. So I'm wondering if there's ways that you guys have been able to build like that representation in these spaces for people to feel comfortable when it comes to connecting with nature.
I'm sure there are other people on the panel that can speak to it too, but I'll give a couple of examples that are really quite recent. We're in a unique position at the University of Michigan because this is not a land grant. And our friends at Michigan State, where many of us who work in agriculture or all things nature went to school, including myself, because we're not a land grant, we don't have a $400 million research machine here pumping out of the USDA. And that is the case down the street at Michigan State. That is the case at University of Florida or UC Davis or other places that are, University of Minnesota. And these places also have really substantial research enterprises, physical infrastructure, and Beal in the research greenhouse, like you're going to have 100,000 new square feet of research greenhouse space, for example. But because we're here at the University of Michigan, because we're not a land grant, because we don't have that machinery shaping necessarily the exact same, like it's not the same profile for research here. We have a different center of gravity, and we're able to invest more in a humanistic approach, or maybe move it more toward our center of gravity than other institutions. In our case, that's led to a couple of really unique interventions. One is with Jewish Family Services, the refugee resettlement agency in Washtenaw County. When the United States withdrew from Afghanistan a couple of years ago, 18 months, 2 years ago now, 2 years ago, the Washtenaw County was slated to receive hundreds, I think it's something like 1,350 new Afghan refugees into Washtenaw County. So we worked with Jewish Family Services and wrote a Refugee Agricultural Partnership Program grant, and it provided several $100,000s to underwrite the creation of a land-based intervention to make something truly dehumanizing more human through access to and connection with the land. And it's thriving. It's working incredibly well. And it moved from initially an Afghani focus to instead, it's 75 enrollees right now each summer, and it's they're coming from all over the globe, right? But what's happened, because it's multi-generational, to the person asked the question, and because it's integrated into other wraparound services and into their communities more, they've moved the people that we're working with, the clients, they are, it started out where they were in their own space working on their own plot, and then it became they're trading things with the folks from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. They're trading tomatoes, and then it became their kids are playing, and then it became wraparound programming that our education team was able to provide for the youth, and then it became those kids are now running all over the botanical gardens and the arboretum, and so there's a generational thing to it, and like it takes real investment, is I guess what I'm trying to say. There are lighter touches, of course, at the Arboretum right now. There's a Black feminist nature walk you can take, put on by one of our faculty members in African American Studies. So, I mean, these things exist out there all over the outdoor world, just like every other museum that's been trying to figure out how to do representational work and be with community instead of at them or for them. Outdoor spaces are in that same conversation, just like our brothers and sisters in museums. So these are just a couple interventions, but it's alive. Yeah.
I'd like to jump in on that briefly as well, because I think the most critically important piece is to not pretend that it's not true. And this has been a big reckoning within the adventure therapy community, where there was an ethos of adventure therapy is great for all, wilderness therapy is great for everyone. And it's like, well, your white privilege is showing. And to maybe really consider why the outdoors is not safe for other communities. One easy example is, yes, people who've experienced migration, like maybe that was a lot of profoundly, traumatically unsafe outdoor time. Or within the context of American enslavement, there was the hierarchy of like working to find a more safe role by doing, quote unquote, good work in the fields, so that you can be elevated to a safer role within the house, creates this sense of outdoors being more unsafe. So I think naming it and letting the diverse folks that you're working with know that you recognize where this comes from and giving them a chance to name it and feel it can go a really long way. Also want to throw in that Native American practices were specifically forbidden, and so they're by white colonizers. So there's a lot of different directions that this has shown up in non-white communities that white privilege tends to kind of roll over by just saying, you know, outdoor nature is great for everyone all the time.
A couple specific recommendations, and also I'm not sure if you're here this morning, but there was a question that generated a lot of recommendations in that space, and I see Sean is still here and has had a good response to that, so you can talk to Sean. Two specific recommendations. One is there's a group called Shades of the Outdoors that I've just been looking for do you know about this group? Yeah. Okay. It's a Facebook group. It's a local guy who moved back to town and wanted to recreate community among BIPOC folks, started a Facebook group. It's a group for folks to go on hikes, meet. They're doing birding walks. You know, we collaborated in a group I'm involved in to do a cycling, you know, around town sort of cycling event with them. So affinity and identity groups are really great ways, just groups in general can provide a safer space. And then a group I work with in town called Common Cycle has a femme, trans, women, non-binary program, which is focused on folks with, you know, building that community and getting outside on bikes specifically. But it seems like affinity and identity groups are a really nice place to sort of start your sort of nature journey.
If I can chime in with a really quick, great resource, if you are new to all of this and are curious about what kinds of curriculums exist out there, if you are someone who wants more education and also wants to have these conversations, the Wilderness Society did a really great job of building their public lands curriculum, and it addresses exactly these topics, and it has the full curriculum online for free. So if you just Google the Wilderness Society's public lands curriculum and read through that, there's a section called Find Your Outdoor Connection that does a great job of how to have those conversations, or even how to connect with people who have diverse backgrounds to get them to recognize their connection. And our Adventure Leadership program does a workshop on it pretty regularly. So holler if you would like to learn a little bit more about that.
Thank you guys for your answers. To echo kind of her question, just thinking about access in terms of all of this, I think the prescription aspect and just nature in general, and thinking about how it promotes wellness, is really good for people who have access. For example, people who are in areas that we could consider cement cities, or people who do not have access to proper healthcare amenities or physicians. It just isn't necessarily applicable. So I'm curious to know how the conversation of access is coming up in your guys' work, and how you're addressing how people are affected if they don't have access to kind of the amenities that you guys are talking about. Thank you.
Well, yeah, it's an important question. No, and there are, it depends on your definition of nature, right? Part of this, someone commented earlier earlier this morning about nature as a spectrum from that thing that's distant, you know, that is an immersive thing that not everybody does have access to the weed that's growing between the sidewalks, you know, or the pigeon, right? And all of that is true. So, and you're going, but they're not the same experience, right? They're very different experience. So, like, let's not pretend they're the exact same thing, right? Like being able to grow some tomatoes on your balcony is not the same thing as being able to immerse yourself in a space and feeling like it's yours, or that you're its. Maybe it's a better way to say it. There have been attempts to bring more natural materials to people, right? That's a significant thing. So just like there was the bookmobile, Naturemobile is a thing. I think it exists out there in the world. Also bringing loose natural parts. I'm quoting my friend Lee, who I get to work with, is our expert in nature play, and a lot of self-guided work with loose natural parts can be brought to different contexts, to different civic organizations and things like that. More than anything, in our town, transportation, but also cultural access, like knowing that it's a place where your language, your value systems are going to be welcome, maybe even already present, is a big piece of it. But I think transportation's a big one in this town. You know, we can talk about it at a national scale, but too many different kinds of problems to try and comment on right now. A lot of places not free too. Like a lot of nature is not free. Captain Newman represents, you know, a wonderful asset, a unique asset that we all get to enjoy and use, and that we need, not just enjoy. And that makes it sound like a luxury. That's unique. That's a unique, and I know it's not evenly distributed, but I do think that transportation and bringing, you know, shade access additionally is food access. I mean, it's not just this, right? It travels as a pack of all these things that we care about as different ways that justice intersects with the natural world.
I think we'll segue into our next session. Thank you so much for all your really thoughtful questions, and another round of applause for our lightning talk speakers.